You sit by the glowing embers of a dying fire. The air is cold. Your body feels heavy after a long day of tracking game across the open savanna. In the shadows of the cave, you listen to the soft, rhythmic breathing of your 2-year-old child sleeping on a bed of dried ferns. You know with absolute certainty that having another baby right now would be a disaster. It would mean less milk for the toddler you already hold. It would mean less mobility for your nomadic band. It would drastically lower your own chances of surviving the fast-approaching winter. How do you stop it from happening? For more than 300,000 years of human history, this exact calculation was made every single night. Your ancestors were not passive passengers to their own biology. They did not blindly reproduce until their environments collapsed into starvation. Today, the average modern woman spends roughly 3 decades of her life managing her fertility with synthetic hormones, plastic devices, and precise medical tracking. It feels like a completely modern luxury. But long before the first pharmacy was ever built, ancient societies regulated their family sizes with a shocking degree of precision. How did they achieve this without modern science? To understand their secrets, you have to look at the natural world they inhabited. Your prehistoric ancestors possessed an intimate, microscopic understanding of their environment. They knew which roots could cure a fever, which berries could stop a beating heart, and which leaves could pause the reproductive cycle. They did not view family planning as a moral taboo. They viewed it as a baseline requirement for staying alive. If a band grew too quickly, everyone starved. Survival demanded control. How did they maintain that control across millennia? The first and most ancient line of defense was entirely biological. Anthropologist Melvin Konner lived among the Kungsan hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari Desert in the mid-20th century to study this exact phenomenon. He documented a lifestyle that closely mirrors how your ancestors lived for hundreds of generations. Kung women did not use pills or barriers, yet they consistently maintained a perfect 4-year gap between births. The secret lay in their parenting habits. They carried their infants everywhere. They nursed them multiple times every hour, all day and all night. What did this constant nursing do to the female body? This intensive breastfeeding triggers a powerful hormonal shift. Modern medicine calls this lactational amenorrhea. When an infant suckles consistently, the stimulation sends a direct signal to the mother's brain to suppress the hormones required for ovulation. It is a built-in biological pause button. Your body realizes it is already pouring immense energy into keeping one human alive. Therefore, it refuses to start the process of creating another. It is a highly effective natural contraceptive, but it only works under very specific conditions. It requires around-the-clock contact and unrestricted nursing. What happened when the human lifestyle changed forever? Roughly 12,000 years ago, humans abandoned the nomadic life. You settled down into permanent farming villages. You traded wild game for starchy crops like wheat, rice, and corn. This shift completely disrupted the ancient biological balance. Infants were no longer carried on long foraging trips. They were fed mushy grain porridge instead of constant breast milk. This caused the natural 4-year birth gap to collapse entirely. Women began ovulating much sooner after giving birth. Suddenly, families were facing a massive population boom they were not prepared to feed. They needed a new solution. How did they adapt? They turned to active, conscious chemistry. You can find the proof written on ancient clay and reed paper. Archaeological excavations in the early 20th century uncovered the Kahun gynecological papyrus in Egypt. This document dates back to roughly 1800 BCE. It contains the oldest written medical prescriptions in human history. Among treatments for infections and injuries, it lists specific recipes for preventing conception. The text instructs women to mix crocodile dung, honey, and sour milk into a small, solid plug. This plug was inserted into the body before intimacy. It sounds like pure superstition, is it? Modern biochemistry tells us a completely different story. When scientists analyzed these ancient ingredients, they found a fascinating chemical reaction. Sour milk contains high concentrations of lactic acid. Crocodile dung is naturally highly alkaline. When mixed together, they create a potent chemical environment that acts as a highly effective spermicide. The thick honey and dung created a physical block over the cervix, while the acid actively neutralized the sperm. Your ancestors were practicing target-specific chemical engineering in mud brick homes. They did not know what sperm looked like under a microscope, yet they knew exactly how to stop them. The Egyptians were not alone in this chemical pursuit. Across the ancient world, women utilized the living pharmacy growing right outside their doors. In the ancient Mediterranean, the city-state of Cyrene became fabulously wealthy off a single wild plant. This plant was called silphium. It was a species of giant fennel that grew only on a narrow strip of land in modern-day Libya. Silphium was considered a wonder drug. It was so critically important to the ancient economy that its image was stamped onto their silver currency. Why was it so valuable? The Roman physician Savannas of Ephesus wrote extensively about silphium in the 2nd century CE. He noted that women would drink a small, coin-sized amount of silphium juice mixed with water once a month. It acted as an extremely powerful emergency contraceptive. Modern pharmacologist John Riddle has dedicated decades to studying these ancient herbal records. His research suggests that silphium contained chemical compounds that prevented the hormone progesterone from doing its job. Without progesterone, a fertilized egg cannot attach to the uterine wall. It was the ancient world's version of the morning after pill. It was so effective and so wildly popular that humans literally harvested the plant into complete extinction by the end of the 1st century. They used it until it was gone. Once silphium vanished, women had to find alternatives. They looked to a common weed called Queen Anne's lace, or wild carrot. Let us reconstruct a typical morning in a Bronze Age village. You walk down to the local riverbed to collect the tiny, hairy seeds of the wild carrot plant. You crush them into a fine powder and swallow them with a cup of wine immediately after intimacy. For centuries, modern historians dismissed this as useless folklore, but laboratory trials on mice have recently vindicated this ancient practice. The seeds contain compounds that actively block the synthesis of progesterone. Your ancestors had discovered a highly functional, plant-based interceptor. How did they pass this knowledge down? This information was rarely written down by the elite men who wrote history books. It existed as a living, breathing oral tradition. It was passed down from grandmother to mother, from midwife to daughter, whispered by the hearth. It was a form of shared safety. Women across the globe discovered similar tools independently. In ancient India, women used rock salt dipped in oil. In ancient Greece, they used pomegranate skins, which are naturally high in tannins that act as a natural astringent, tightening tissues and blocking pathways. In pre-colonial America, indigenous women utilized cohosh root to regulate their cycles. They looked at the landscape and saw an escape hatch from the brutal toll of endless childbearing. The counterintuitive twist is that modern medicine did not invent family planning, it merely standardized it. In fact, the rise of modern, institutional medicine actually caused much of this ancient knowledge to be lost. During the Middle Ages and the early modern period, the rise of centralized religious and political authorities heavily criminalized herbal contraception. Midwives who held the secrets of wild carrot or silphium alternatives were frequently persecuted. The oral chain was broken. The living pharmacy was buried in the dirt. Women were forced to rely on dangerous, ineffective folklore instead of the real botanical science of their ancestors. When you look at a plastic blister pack of birth control pills on a bathroom counter today, you are looking at the final evolution of a deeply ancient struggle. Your body still operates on the exact same biological loops that regulated life on the Pleistocene savanna. You share the same desires, the same fears, and the same fundamental need to choose when to bring new life into the world. Your ancestors were not primitives trapped by their own flesh. They were clever, resourceful survivors who looked at the plants beneath their feet and found a way to reclaim their own destiny. You sit by the glowing embers of a dying fire, completely in control of your own body.